Hello. I'm like 99% sure that I'm live. Let's see. Am I live? Uh, Doing this alone tonight, so there's nobody to tell me if this is working or not. But we're gonna assume that we're live. So fantastic. I'm Jay Shifman. Obviously, you probably know that. This is a day in the life, and I'm going to give people a couple of minutes. So we'll start in about 2 minutes or so. Until then, sit tight, grab a drink, I don't know, whatever you enjoy tonight, and I'll be back in a minute. All right. Welcome again, anyone watching, to A Day in the Life. I am Jay Shifman. I'm the founder of Choose Your Struggle, and I am a storyteller, a speaker, event and podcast host, and I'm also a guy in long term recovery. So this is very, very personal to me. Now, a couple things before we get started tonight. Number one, welcome to anybody watching this on LinkedIn. This is the first time Choose Your Struggle has gone live on LinkedIn after, 9 months of lobbying. I finally was granted LinkedIn Live, and so this is the first event to go live on LinkedIn. It has replaced Twitter. Sorry, Twitter. And is live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. For those of you who have not seen an event that I've done before, a couple of things about this. This is on StreamYard, wonderful platform, big fan of StreamYard. A couple of things about StreamYard. As you can see, green screen, not the best on StreamYard. It isn't as good as YouTube. I've actually talked to the owners. It's a thing they're working on. So, fingers crossed. One of the things that just isn't as good about StreamYard, you see this. I'm going to point to it right now. Can I get it? Can I get it? There it is, right there. This number at the top of the screen. Completely ignore it. Doesn't mean anything. StreamYard does not work well with the platforms, and if you log in under different things, you'll see that number be different. Usually, it'll say no more than 2 or 3 people are watching, and then the day afterwards, I get a report from StreamYard that's like, "Hey, guess what? Like 60 people watched your event." So ignore it. That it happens. I can see your comments. So if you're interested, if you have a question, please go ahead and drop that underneath this video, wherever you're watching it. This will live on live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. It'll also go out as a special episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast in next couple of weeks. Those are sort of the house cleaning items or whatever, housekeeping items. Couple of things, though, before we really get started. So what you're watching tonight is called Day in the Life. It's a virtual storytelling series where normally I interview someone, or I should say I welcome somebody, they tell a story, and then I come back at the end to interview them. The other event that I do is called Rock Bottom Storytellers. That's where 4 storytellers and a musician all come together for one night. A fantastic event. The storytellers are all different mixes of experience, but the only thing we all have in common is we've been through some kind of trauma, and we talk about that trauma. We've done 2 of those. The third one is scheduled for the last week of August. I should have had this date. I'm going to pull it up while you're here. This is wonderful. This makes for a wonderful watching. I apologize. But it is Wednesday, August 25th will be the next Rock Bottom Storytellers 3. Number 3. Already got some amazing storytellers lined up. It's going to be an all-women lineup. I'm so excited about that. Now, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute. You said normally you bring somebody else on, but there's nobody else on the bill tonight. That's right. It's just me. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, this week is my birthday. On Saturday, I turned 35. I'm wearing one of the little gifts I got myself. You can't see it, but it's a Harlem Globetrotters jersey. I think it's nice. But in honor of my birthday, I wanted to step out from behind the host duty and tell a story tonight. So that's number one. But number two is that this is an opportunity for me, sort of like an open mic for a comedian, to work on a story. But I'll tell you in a minute why that's important. Before we do that, you'll see a couple of things. Now, at the very bottom of this, down, where's my finger? There we go. Down here is all my links. So that's where you can find out more about me. And if you go to the first one, the campsite.bio, that has everything there. Now, the other one is the podcast, Kite Link, Choose Your Struggle. But there is a third link that you need to know tonight. I'm going to go ahead and put this one up on screen. It is a long stream of numbers, but it is in the comment section or the comments below the video on both YouTube and Facebook. It didn't copy to LinkedIn. That's fine. That is my birthday fundraiser. I am raising money for an incredible organization called Savage Sisters that I'm a board member of. And I really would appreciate if everybody checks it out. You can find that at the campsite bio, or like I said in the comments. Go to my Facebook page; it's there. Go to my YouTube. My LinkedIn. It's there. It's all over. The goal is 2,500. Going into tonight, we're almost at $2,000 between online and offline donations. So, really incredible organization that does recovery housing and harm reduction services here in Philadelphia. I've been so lucky to call myself a board member and a volunteer for them. I love it. So please check that out. The deadline is on Sunday the 18th. Thanks to Spark Tabor, he's going to do a live Twitch stream thing to help me raise money. I don't know Twitch. I don't know the terminology. The other link that I want you to point out is this one right here, Bookshop. Bookshop is the partner for these events. Big shout out to Bookshop. They're a partner for my podcast and for this event. Bookshop, if you haven't checked them out yet, if you go online to Bookshop, you can pick out your favorite small bookstore, neighborhood mom and pop, or a bookstore that you really like, and a part of the proceeds from your order will go to that bookstore. So definitely check that out. You can also, if you go to this one, thebookshop.org/shops@CYS, you can support the podcast in the process, or all the work that I do at Choose Your Struggle. My team would really appreciate it. The other thing about Choose Your Struggle is we do have some merch. My team is hard at work setting up a new merch shop, but we still have some of the tank tops. If you've been waiting to get one, this is what they look like. This is the women's cut. I do have unisex as well. So reach out to me on my website, jshifman.com. All right, that is all the announcements. Time to tell the story, right? As I was saying, this is a chance for me to start or to try new things. This is my open mic, and this is my platform. So I was pretty sure of what story I was going to tell, and I'm making dinner for my wife and I about literally an hour and a half ago, and it hits me that the story I was going to tell was my rock bottom story. Now, I wasn't intentionally telling my rock bottom story. That wasn't the goal. But there's a funny part of it, and that was going to be the story I told. And so then I was like, okay, I can't tell that because at some point, I'm going to want to tell my rock bottom story. Like, that's the other big event I do. I'm going to want to participate. So I went, okay, what am I going to do? And my brain's flashing through all the different stories. By the way, shout out to New Riff. Good whiskey. So my brain's flashing through all the stories. And I decided, okay, what if I told what I'm going to call the Wendy story? And of course, then my inner monologue went, oh, you can't tell the Wendy story. And I said, why? And I actually, this was not literally me talking to myself, but it was me kind of digging through this processing. And the response that I got from myself was because it's too real. And then I thought, this is my fucking platform. I can tell whatever the fuck I want. So I'm going to tell the Wendy story. I've never told this story. This is going to be a new one. So again, sort of the open mic-ness of this event. I wasn't sure I was going to tell it. I was still debating until I got to this. The lights came on, and I hadn't thought of a different one. So that was my brain going, tell the fucking Wendy story. So there's only a couple people who really know this story. Multiple therapists. And ML Lanzalata, if you watched the last Rock Bottom Storytellers, he was incredible. And he and I were working on a project together, and I told him the story for that project. He would be shocked that I'm telling the Wendy story. So the Wendy story actually starts, it takes place at Austin Riggs. And for those who know my story, you know that a part of that was spending 3 months in a lockdown unit, in a long-term care facility, what we would have called a mental institution 50 years ago. And that long-term care facility was in the Berkshires. It was in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and it was called Austin Riggs. Austin Riggs was just a terrible place. I've described it multiple times as like, when you walk in, like you can feel the death. This place has been around for over 100 years or something like that. It's been the home to famous people and not famous people. Very famously, James Taylor wrote multiple songs about his time at Austin Riggs, and I actually spent a couple of months living in his old room. It's sort of one of those knowledges that's passed down by people who stay there. Which room is James Taylor's and various other people, and I stayed in his for a while. By the way, because of that, whenever I hear the second verse of Rockabye Sweet Baby James, I still tear up a little bit because he wrote that part while leaving this area. But it was a pretty horrible place. And I really only had, I was well liked. I mean, we were all kind of there together. And of course, there are not great people. And then, there are amazing people. And I was more well liked. But I really only had 2 people that I would call like really good friends. One of them, I'll use her real name, and it's Robin. And the reason I'm comfortable using her real name is that unfortunately Robin's not with us anymore. She passed a couple years ago, and I learned that from Facebook. We hadn't stayed in touch. Robin was everybody's big sister. She was the person that I would go to if I had a rough day, and she was that for a lot of people. She kind of was mother hen to a lot of us, even though she was only a couple years older than us. Really wonderful, loving person, very very hippie-ish. It was hard not to like Robin, and there are plenty of stories I could tell about Robin, but that's not what this one is. The other person that was a true friend was someone that I'm going to call Wendy. Now, Wendy's not her real name, but she, luckily, and you'll understand sort of the tongue-in-cheek use of the word luckily there later. Luckily, Wendy is still with us, and so I'm not comfortable using her real name because I don't know how much about this she's open with, and we're friends on Facebook, and so if I said her real name, maybe one of you sleuths is gonna, I don't know, but for her protection, I'm gonna call her Wendy. And I call her that because I actually wrote this story a couple years ago, and I called her that when I wrote this, and since then she's been in my mind as Wendy. So Wendy was like a little sister to me. she she got to Austin Riggs a couple days after me, and when you first check into Austin Riggs, everybody, when they first gets there, lives in this big house. It's an old house, and some people stay there their entire time. Other people graduate to other properties and then apartments or whatever. Well, everybody when they first gets there lives in the same wing. It's this far back wing, tiny rooms, and then eventually you graduate to bigger rooms. Well, because Wendy got there a couple days after me, she was 2 doors down from me. There was nobody in between, and we were the only two people on the wing at the time. And immediately we took to each other. She, and not in a romantic way, by the way. There was only 4 things you couldn't do at Austin Riggs. There was no fucking, fighting, drinking, or smoking, or drugs. Those were the 4 things you couldn't do. And we just took to each other as friends. She was also from farther away. This was in the Berkshires, as I said. I was from Cincinnati, Ohio. She was from Arizona. And we were both far from home, and we bonded. And quickly we sort of were inseparable, She was shy, I think is the best way to put it. It wasn't that she wasn't outgoing, she was just shy. And she didn't have a lot of friends, and so we became very close. And it was the kind of thing where we ate together. To help you understand, being in a place like this is a little like camp. Everybody, there's a lot of downtime, and there's a lot of structured time, and there's cliques, there's you sit with your friends at meals, you go do things with your friends, which includes if you can find somebody with a car, which I had the last month and a half or so that I was there. That meant leaving the grounds to go do stuff. And Wendy and I were like that, and with other people. We would all hang out, but like Wendy and I were tight. And she was struggling the same way that a lot of us was. Now she had a diagnosis similar to mine. I don't remember her exact diagnosis, but she was struggling with some kind of a mood disorder. Unlike myself, hers was not a misdiagnosis, but a truly wonderful person, a very kind person, a very kind soul. The most important night, I think, of my time there is the night that I'm going to talk about. The second most important was the night that Robin Williams released what would become his last stand-up special. Now, obviously, we didn't know it at the time. This was 2009. He didn't pass away for another 5-6 years. So we didn't know at the time this would be his last special, but it was. And I and Wendy and a couple other people petitioned the Austin Riggs to let us have a room. They had a couple of like theater rooms in the basement, and also to splurge to buy this special on HBO. And we all sat around. There's probably 20 of us in this basement room watching this. And it was a beautiful night because Robin was a hero to so many of us. Here's a guy who struggled with his mental health, who struggled with substance misuse, was open about it, had fought it, and at the time was winning. And obviously that narrative changed a little bit later, but he's still my hero. And I've got this is a dedication to Robin Williams. Back behind where my camera is right now, I have a mini shrine to Robin Williams. Big fan, still my hero. So that night was like the happiest I ever saw when, all of us were together in this basement room watching Robin, and we saw ourselves on the screen, and that can't be minimized. He talked about this stuff, and this was in 2009. This is 12 years ago. We're still fighting to get people to talk about this, and Robin was open with it. So we loved him for that. That was probably late October, early November, something like that. Well, as is the case with places like this, I actually got to move out of that wing and into James Taylor's room, and And even though Wendy and I weren't 2 hours down from each other, we were still very close. She helped me decorate my new room. And we still saw each other all the time, ate at meals and all that kind of stuff. Well, the holiday season comes. It's probably, I'm going to guess like the 18th, 19th, somewhere around there of December of 2009. And I hadn't noticed anything down with Wendy. I've thought about this many times since, and I hadn't noticed anything down. But we went shopping together. Like I said, I had a car by this point, and we went a town over to Target, Walmart, something like that. I don't remember where it was. And we're pulling up to the store, and Wendy says to me, "Do you mind not walking around with me at the store?" And I immediately thought it was weird because, like I said, we were inseparable. We did everything together. But then that little voice in my head was like, well, maybe she's buying a present for you. It is the holiday season. I was going to get her a present, so that made sense. So I said, sure, yeah, that's fine. And we did our own thing. And when I was done shopping, I still have this distinct memory of finishing my shopping, and I'm checking out, and I look up, and she's sitting by the door and like has her bag clutched tightly. And again, I didn't think much of this. Nothing occurred to me. So we get in the car, and Wendy won't show me anything that she bought. And again, I'm like, okay, this is weird, but maybe there's a big present in there for me, and she doesn't want me to see it, and so I brushed it off. I didn't push. So we go back, and it's late afternoon, and if you've never been in the Berkshires in December, it is snowy as you can imagine, And so everyone's indoors, and so there wasn't a chance to like go anywhere. We weren't going to walk down the street, go to a different restaurant for dinner or something like that, which we did on occasion. I come down for dinner, and Wendy's not there. And I'm getting worried now. Now I'm concerned. So I eat with the rest of our friends, sitting with Robin. I remember this. And I might have even said, I'm worried about this. So I hang out, and Wendy doesn't show up. So after dinner, I'm waiting, and she doesn't show up. And we go up for med time. As you can imagine, med time is mandatory. There is no skipping med time. Now, I learned that night, if you do, nothing happens. Because Wendy skipped it. And I was sitting. So meds were in this sort of, it's a hallway, but it was sort of a little landing area with some couches. And I just sat there and waited. And she didn't come. So after meds, it's probably by this point 9:30, 10. I walked down the hall to my old hallway where Wendy still was the only person on this hall, and I knock on her door, and very meekly from inside, she's like, "Who is it?" And I was like, "Hey, it's Jay." And she's like, she told me to go away. Now I know something is up. So I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going anywhere. So I sit down, and I sit with my back against the door frame, and I just talked to her. I don't remember anything that I said that night. I don't remember anything at all. A couple years ago, when I was telling this and other things about this period to a therapist, she diagnosed me with PTSD and said I had repressed memories. Look, she's a professional. She says so. I don't think so. I think when you're on as many drugs as I was on at the time, it's normal to forget some things. Not to say that there aren't parts of this that I have intentionally been like, and gone, but I don't remember anything from that night. Anything specific. I do remember after about an hour, I tried her doorknob, and it was unlocked. It had been locked before. So I go inside, and she's kind of huddled in a ball on the bed, and I sit down in a chair, just keep talking. She didn't respond much, but I'm just talking, you know. And an hour later, maybe I get up and I sit down on the bed next to her and keep talking, and eventually I put my arm around her, and finally, finally I said to her, like, look, Wendy, you know I'm not going to let you do this, right? And, you know, I guess at that point she had come to terms with the fact that she wasn't going to kill herself that night. So she said, I know. And, you know, we talked for a while, and we both, by this point, we're both, a lot of tears are being shed. And probably another half an hour. We're going on hour 3 at this point, where I finally was like, will you let me take you down to the nurse's station? And she fought it for a little bit, but eventually, you know, like I said, she had come to terms with the fact that it you know, she wasn't going to kill herself, so it wasn't going to happen that night. I wasn't going to let it. So she said, okay. So I physically held her by the wrist, like a child, and walked her to the nurse's station, because I was I was not going to let go of her. You know, it was very much this physical, I am literally physically saving your life tonight, you know. So I walk her to the nurse's station, and luckily for Wendy, the nicest nurse, this older woman, very clearly an old hippie, you know, wore Birkenstocks, long, just, you had to know her, but long, you know, very much an old hippie, was on duty that night. And I told her, I was like, hey, Wendy has something she wants to tell you. And Wendy told her that, you know, what was going on. And what they do in that circumstance is there's a bedroom right across from the nurse's station that was just a bed, and like the door, like, I like remember it being like a half door kind of thing. It might have just been like the door didn't lock. I don't know. But Wendy had to go in there, and she called they had an agreement with the lockdown unit in the hospital a town over, and she called them, and the ambulance came and took Wendy away. So, 2 aftermaths of that story. The first is I went to go see Wendy a couple days later in the lockdown unit. Her parents were with her, and the joy that they had when they saw me was like startling. They were so thankful. Wendy had obviously told them what had happened. They were so thankful for what I had done, and it was sweet, but also I couldn't understand, and this is the other direction of this. I couldn't understand why they weren't as furious as I was. Because here I was at a place that was supposedly one of the finest mental institutions in the country. A place that people literally mortgage their house to send their loved ones. And I'm using that word correctly because somebody I was in there with told me that his family mortgaged their house to send him there. And yet, if it hadn't been for me, Wendy would be dead. And I was furious. Now, what made this even worse was that in the time I was there, multiple people had already died by suicide. I actually talked to somebody that I was there with about 2 years ago, and our recollections differ. She remembers there being 2 people during the time I was there. I remember 4. Either way, there were at least 2 people that killed themselves while I was there. I remember 4. I'm going to go with 4. And it would have been more. If it would have been more because it would have been Wendy if it wasn't for me. And I was furious. I'm not a therapist. I'm still not. 12 years later, I have my undergraduate, all these certifications. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a nurse. I'm nothing. I was just a person who cared. And I saved her life. When it comes to suicide awareness, we hear a lot from people like myself who have survived suicide attempts. We hear a lot from family members of people and loved ones, from people who have lost their lives to suicide. What we don't hear from enough, and this is why I'm telling this story tonight, what we don't hear from enough is someone who has stopped a person from committing suicide. Because, again, as someone who has lost people, as someone who has lived through it themselves, this is the most painful one. There's no answer to this one. There's no answer. There's no comfort. There's no, well, at least they're not in pain anymore, which is what we say about people who take their own life. There's no redemption that my story has, right? I'm 12 years later. I'm doing all this. I'm so thankful I survived. We don't have that in this story. I'm sure Wendy is thankful she survived. But there's no tying things up in a neat little bow that a terrified 23-year-old had to stop someone from killing themselves in what is supposed to be the finest mental institution in this country. There is no perfect ending. And that story needs to be heard more. That's why I'm telling the story tonight. So, the literal immediate aftermath of that story. Wendy is in the lockdown unit. And the next day, I started the process of getting out of there. It took me like another week. Obviously, I had to figure out where I was going to go. And all of you who know my story know that means going to live with my grandmother. And this begins the story I was going to tell tonight of leaving this place. That obviously you'll hear on a Rock Bottom Storytellers at some point. Because if this story isn't heartbreaking enough, as they say, but wait, there's more. But here was the hardest part. After this all happened, everybody, obviously the story gets out. Everyone is, very much like, Jay, it's amazing what you did. But there's not enough people willing to go, what the fuck went wrong here? So, when you leave a place like that, I don't know if this is still the truth. I hope it's not. When I was there, it was. You have to go. If you've ever seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, when everybody sits around in a circle and just tears somebody apart, that is literally what I went through, and that is a story for another day. Listen to me on the Courage to Change podcast with Ashley Lowe Blassingame. Listen to her on mine. We talk about how we both went through this and how absurd this is. But that happened to me, and the only time that I was the center of that attention was the day that I decided to leave. What happens is I was there against my will, but I wasn't court ordered, so I was allowed to check myself out. But the process for doing so is you had to go in front of this group, which is hundreds of people. We're talking every patient there, every therapist, every clinician in a room. Beautiful day room, by the way. Beautiful room. All of them ganging up on you. And this is where I bring Robin back into the story, because I could not have done this without Robin. She was my rock that day. I told her what I was going to do. I told her why I was so angry. She agreed with me. She supported me. And Robin never went to these because she did not believe in them. She couldn't do it. And I felt that. I almost got thrown out of this place because one day I was so fed up with this one guy picking on someone. I don't even remember who it was. But it was someone who couldn't defend themselves. And I got in his face. And if somebody hadn't grabbed me, I would have knocked him the fuck out. And that would have been it for me. Which is probably would have been a good thing. But I get it. Like, this place was awful. And Robin went with me. She never went, but she went with me to just sit there. So that when I couldn't do it, I would know she was there. And I did it. I stood down, a therapist, a grown fucking woman, looking me in the eyes as a scared, angry 23-year-old telling me that I was a fucking idiot and I was throwing my life away. Because that's the shit that they did to you in this place. I stared her down when she did it, and I said, fine, you can have that opinion, I'm still leaving. And I was allowed to leave. And it wouldn't have happened except for Robin and Wendy. So I left, and I happened to go to Arizona, because that's where my grandmother was, and that's where Wendy was from. And we hung out a couple times after that, actually. You know, it wasn't the same, obviously. We weren't locked together in a mental institution. But we were still friendly, and we've lost touch over the years. And, you know, I check up on her on Facebook every now and then. But that is my story of Wendy. And I hope, if you're hearing this, whether you're watching live right now, and I have no idea how many people are on this, but whether you're watching live or you're going to hear this later, watching it live or listen as a special episode when this comes out on the podcast. Couple of things. That's a story I don't tell that often. I've only told it, like I said, a couple of times. But it's a story that a lot of people have. Because this shit is way more common than you think. I am very open about my own attempts at suicide. I'm very open about my own overdose. But I am the extreme minority. And that is why people who do this work, that's why people like fucking Robin Williams are so goddamn important. Because for every person like me who is willing to do this, there's, I don't fucking know, 10, 20, 30 people who aren't. So we've made amazing progress on this over the last while. You know, I don't know. We've made amazing progress, but we are nowhere near where we need to be. And that's why I do this. That's what Choose Your Struggle comes from. Two things, two goals. End stigma and promote honest and fact-based education around mental health, substance misuse and recovery, and drug use and policy. Because once this stigma is down, and you know, you can't hate up close. That's the ending the stigma part. You cannot hear this story. You cannot see me standing here crying, telling you about how I had to fucking save someone's life and still think you know better. You can't. You cannot. And if you still do, you are the goddamn Grinch. But once you have that stigma down, what are you going to do with it? You have to right these wrongs. We have been led. We have been misled. Intentionally and unintentionally for far too long. Because we haven't given room for people with lived experience to be at the table. So next time you are at an event, a conference, and every single person there has letters after their name, know who's not there. And that's people like me, people who've actually been through this shit. People like Wendy, people like Robin. Our stories are the ones that don't get told because we're too busy listening to the research. We need all that research because without it, we're not making any progress. But that door cannot close after them. That's all I got. thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Please support the birthday fundraiser if you're seeing this before, was it July 18th? And reach out. I say this every time I speak. Two things. Number one, I want to hear from you because I want to know if this resonates. I want to know what you like, what you don't like. But also, if you are struggling and you hear this, those of us who do this, those of us who actually care about this, we have a saying. We'd rather spend 2 hours listening to you today than 2 hours at your funeral tomorrow. You should notice that in that story, there's two incredible women, one of whom is gone. And I'm lucky because she knew how much she meant to me. But I don't get the opportunity to tell her time and again. So reach out. Choose your struggle.